Hi and welcome back to A Case of Books. Today I'm going to talk through my top 5 books that are coming out in February. February is a really strong month for books, and I read way more than 5 books that I thought were really impressive. So I just want to start by highlighting 4 other books that I really enjoyed. So there's The Woman Who Ran, if you're after a really intelligent psychological thriller. Jhumpa Lahiri's In Other Words, which is a fascinating look at her relationship with language, particularly Italian. The Maker of Swans is a very impressive kind of literary fantasy debut. And then Alwyn Hamilton's Rebel of the Sands, which is the start of a brilliant new YA series. So onto my top 5. First of all is a mix of poetry and memoir/essays, and it's Holly McNish's new book, which is called Nobody Told Me. Now, I must admit, if anyone else had written this, I probably wouldn't have read it. I don't tend to go for books about parenting, but I loved Holly McNish's last poetry collection, which was actually one of my favourite books of last year. It's such a wonderful balance between not shying away from the realities of parenting and what she experienced without being at all alienating to people who don't have children. It's by turns funny, thought-provoking, clever and hugely moving, and I absolutely loved it. It perhaps seems obvious to say try it if you liked her last collection, but I really do think it builds on everything that worked in that and is even better and stronger. My next pick is a debut by an American author called Sunil Yappa, and the book is called Your Heart is a Muscle the Size of a Fist. It's set over one day in 1999 in Seattle during the real-life World Trade Organization protests. It's told from the perspective of several different characters, including the chief of police, his runaway son, some of the protesters, and they all come together to form this beautiful, thought-provoking, clever look at this one day that went down in history as being infamous for the level of police brutality used. There are some pretty violent and shocking bits in this, but ultimately it's really a meditation on love, although not at all sentimental, and the responsibility we have as humans to other people and other countries. I'm a big fan of books told from multiple perspectives, and this actually reminded me of a slightly more lyrical, meditative All Involved by Ryan Gatiss. The next book is about whaling, but take everything you think you know about whaling novels and then this is the actual opposite. It's incredibly charming and very funny and kind of reads like an Austen novel but set in an early 20th century Australian whaling community, as unlikely as that sounds. It's told in the voice of the ridiculously delightful Mary, and it follows the fortunes of her family, the small town community they live in and the whaling crew that her father heads up. My friend Sarah compared the voice of this to Anne Shirley and Anne of Green Gables, and I think that's a really good comparison for tone. Or if you like stories about eccentric families like My Family and Other Animals. Next is another debut, this time by Nigerian writer Chinelo Okparanta, who has written lots of short stories before. It opens during the Biafran War in Nigeria when our main character, Ijoma's father, is killed. It then follows Ijoma as she grows up and realises that she's gay, and how she grapples with her religious faith and her relationship with women, with her mother, and then with the man that she ends up marrying. It's a beautifully written look at some big themes: war, faith, love, sexuality, family, and yet it manages to have a really unique perspective on it, and I think that this has high hopes for the Baileys Prize later this year. In terms of comparisons, the style of writing actually really reminded me of Jhumpa Lahiri's The Lowland, because it's very smart, but it never loses that emotional core. My last book to look out for in February is another debut, but this time you may well have heard of the author already. Janet Ellis of Blue Peter fame has written her first novel, but do not be put off by her celebrity status. She definitely wrote it herself, and it is very good. It's set in London in 1763, and it's about 19-year-old Anne Jacob. She's from a well-to-do but very dysfunctional family, and she's had to deal with some pretty traumatic and upsetting things in her childhood. She's an offbeat, odd, very unreliable and brilliant narrator of her own story, as she gets entangled with the butcher's boy that delivers meat to the household. This is so unexpectedly odd and dark, and it's also brilliantly feminist, and I was so impressed with it, and I can't wait to see what she does next. If you like a warts and all look at history and proto-feminism like The Miniaturist or Sarah Waters novels, then definitely look out for this one. I hope you've enjoyed these recommendations, and do let me know which ones take your fancy. Here are some other places you can find me, and please remember to like the video and to subscribe.